Hey, what's up everybody? This is Meyer, and in this video is what I want to do, and a couple of you guys were asking me about how I do my uplifting bass lines, and particularly in my remix of Walk Away with Asher Postman and Annalisa Franklin. So this is me just going to walk through this bass line and telling you guys how I do everything. First thing I'm going to do, I actually frozen these tracks. Let me unfreeze them. Boom. There we go. So now we can actually work with the actual synths, and we can see kind of what's going on. So first thing you'll notice is this bass line here, and let me go ahead and solo it here at this point so you can actually hear what's going on. And it might be helpful to hear it with the kick too. So, and then that's of course with the sub coming in, which the sub is just pretty simple, pretty straightforward, just doing offbeat, just an offbeat sub. So I want to talk specifically about these mid basses because these are what are filling in kind of the mid or the low mid range. So if I solo these mid basses, let's go ahead and do this. You can see a lot of information in the kind of 200 to 800 hertz range, and then of course they're kind of full spectrum. So you'll see that they're actually going all the way up to 20K as well. So let's go ahead and step through what each of these bass lines are doing, because these are all layered together to create one kind of cohesive sound, and the MIDI for each of them are actually doing something different. So this first one, all that it is, and basically if you notice here, these MIDIs are actually like 1 bar long, and then I've created this Max for Live device that actually arpeggiates it. So what this is doing, this is kick, the kick here, so this note is off, and then it's basically, these aren't triplets, but it's 3/16 notes where the kick goes. So this is the first one. And let me play that with the kick so you get an idea. And then what I'm doing here is the last little bit, it's actually stepping down a note. Now this song is written in a minor key, so what this is doing is going from the tonic or the root or the scale degree down to this sort of 7th scale degree here, which is F sharp. And I'm not using the minor scale that uses that has the sort of major 7th. This is the minor 7th of the tonic here going up, so you can hear. Now that's only really happening during the point where the bass line's playing in the intro and outro. When it comes down to the part where you have the actual drop, notice how I'm not actually arpeggiating, I'm not actually going down to that 7th scale degree, it's basically just playing the tonic. And this is a good trick. If you look at Alan Morrow's AM Studios page, he has a video on doing these uplifting bass lines. Now, I actually made this track before I'd seen his video there, but he talks about doing this where when you have in the intro, you can have all this stuff going on with these mid basses where it's a little bit more interesting. And then when you have a lot more elements like your leads or vocals or things, you're going to have a lot more elements. So it's okay to be a little bit more simple when you're not just playing one note. You know, you have a lot of creativity here where you have just one note and it's basically just your bass line and sub and kick playing. But then when your drop comes or you have other elements of your track where you're having everything else layered, you don't necessarily have to go too crazy. And in fact, sometimes it can clash when you're trying to do too much with too many other different instruments. So let me go ahead and show you the next bass line. So this was the first one. And I believe this is a silent patch. This is Spire. And this was just a custom patch that I made that's just kind of pretty straightforward. So what's really doing a lot of the work is this vocal wavetable and oscillator 4. Let's go on to mid bass number 2. So this is a modified silent patch, and what I've done is I've used this decimate distortion module. So you can see it kind of gives it a little bit of aliasing because it's reducing the sample rate there. So you can see what's going on. The actual pattern of this is the octave, I should mention. So this is going, basically there's no notes where the kick would be hitting, and then it's going down, and then up an octave down, kick plays, down, up, down, down, up, down, down, up, down. So this is your kind of standard roll that you'd hear in uplifting trance, where you have your kick playing on these 16th notes, and then you have your 3/16 notes after that going down, up, down. And then I just took out this frequency here. You'll see with this band, because it was just annoying me. I think it was interfering with one of the other bass lines, so that's why I took it out. Now going on to mid bass 3, this is a silent variant of the silent patch Porter bass. I think this might have been from this is a modified version of, well, now I'm not sure. Is this might have been the kind of extra bank from Sean Tyas and Darren Porter. That's kind of what I'm guessing it was. But what this is doing, so notice how at the very beginning it goes, the kick hits, and then the next 3/16 notes it goes up, down, up. Then it's basically doing 3/16 at the bass note, and then it goes down, up, down. So it's kind of had this different kind of feeling. And the idea is all these bass lines are actually doing different things MIDI-wise, if you notice. So even though they look like they're doing the same thing in the sequencer, these arpeggiators are kind of controlling what the notes are all doing. Now what this does is it gives it a little bit of accent at the beginning of each bar and sort of at the end. And the rest of that is just here. And this sound in particular has a lot of interesting stereo information on the sides. So if you think of it in like a mid-side way, the mids aren't maybe as strong as the sides are. And if I had been doing this now, what I probably would have done is taken an EQ8, and maybe is what I would have done and turn this to mid-side mode, is take the sides and just boost the sides up on the upper register. Just because this is a very wide patch here. So that's kind of what this one's doing. And then mid bass number 4, this is, well, we'll take a look at what this is. This is kind of a different modified version of it's kind of the call and response to this. So this goes up, down, up, and then down, up, down. And this actually does 16ths, up, 16ths, down, up, down. So let's take a listen to what this sounds like. So let me take this flanger off. And of course, this decimate, once again, is going to be doing the sample rate reduction to add a little bit more high frequency information. Now, of course, you want to be a little bit conservative with this, because if you have too much of this decimation, it can interfere with your high end, with your percussion. And that's why you'll see with band number 4, I've rolled off the high end, just to kind of tame the high end down. And then this flanger is what's really doing a lot of the work here, just giving it movement so that your bass line doesn't sound the same. Now, of course, if you're doing side trance, you want every note to sound the same. But what this is going to do is give it this evolving characteristic, even kind of over a bar. And notice how I've tuned the flanger's frequency to a 0.11 hertz. So this isn't beat synced at all. So it's kind of doing this almost polyrhythmic flanger motion. So take a listen. So if you hear it with the other bass line, so what's really doing most of the work here is this first one, is this first bass line. You'll hear this is the one that if I play them all together, that's like the main body. And then these other things are just adding different things. This one's kind of adding a little bit of interest kind of in the high end and in this kind of low mid area. This one is really adding the side information. And then this one is adding that top end that's kind of a different character. And you'll hear this in a lot of my tracks. Like if you listen to Sigma, I have a lot of different patches going on, or different, I've actually made all my own patches in that song, and using different types of synthesis like FM or AM just to kind of give it a different characteristic than your typical subtractive sound, but still having some of these traditional subtractive bass lines too to add support, just kind of give it interest, and all of these are being glued together. So now what I want to do is talk about the processing that's going on the mid bass bus. So probably the easiest thing to do is to turn all of this stuff off. Let me go ahead and do that. Now this Arts acoustic is being controlled. I can't actually turn it off, but I don't know if it's actually, okay, so I have it on a little bit. So let me just go ahead and say I turn this off, and whoops. and same with this delay here. So I can't turn the LFO tool off either, but luckily that's being automated, so that'll be fine. So take a listen when the sub comes in. This is how it is by default. So this EQ here, and this is a very common, is adding a little bit of high end, and I found a couple frequencies that I thought were just being layered a little too hard, so I was just kind of notching those down. That's at 6 and 4. So I forget what key this is in. This might be D sharp major. So these might actually end up being those notes with all these unison bass lines that are kind of the tonic being layered, that fundamental frequency being layered by so many different synths that I just felt like I needed to pull it back. And that's just there to kind of give it a more flat response because I felt like those were a little bit too much. Now, going on to this Mag EQ4, all this is doing is adding a little bit of high end. Courtesy of this airband, really. Now, it's not really doing that much. This looks like big because it's a 2 dB boost, but it's at 40 kilohertz, so it's a very gentle slope. And this is just kind of giving it a little bit of extra kind of bite in the upper range. In my opinion, it really kind of brings it to life. Then another EQ, I felt like I wanted to boost a little bit of the mids, again, because I felt like they were, this is the part that I really wanted to accent to get a balanced mix. So I probably added this on a little bit later. Now, one of the problems you can run into when you're doing this is a lot of these, and even this EQ, this is probably bad practice. You want to make sure that it's not just sounding better because it's louder, but it's actually sounding better because you're doing something useful to the sound. So, you know, otherwise, if it's going to sound better louder, you just turn it up here and you don't do anything where you're boosting everything. So what I try to do with this is I realized that the upper end was fine, especially after this Mag EQ, but with this EQ8, I wanted to bring back some of the mids that I felt like were missing a little bit. And then I noticed how I rolled off some of the top end too. Now, you may not be able to hear that, especially depending on how this is encoded, but my hearing is really sensitive, so I can actually hear that this is, by the time this is cutting it off at 18.6. Now granted, it's even though it's a pretty steep slope, it's going to start affecting the sound a lot earlier than 18.6 kilohertz. So that's probably why I can hear it even more, just kind of taming the high end because we have two bass lines that have that sample rate reduction causing aliasing. Next is this Kinetic. Now this is a plugin that Reorder told me about that Standardwick made with SoundSpot, and it's a distortion plugin. And before I've been just using the stock distortion in Live, or if it was using FL Studio, I'd use like fast distortion. But this is really nice. Take a listen to what this does. This kind of both kind of rounds out the dynamics and it gives it a little bit of grit. So take a listen when I turn this on. So yeah, basically what this is doing is just fattening up the sound by adding some distortion. And I'm not sure what the distortion model is here. It might be like a digital clip, which means if it's digitally clipping the sound, which some people don't find to be that pleasant, but here's what it's doing. It's clipping the sound and adding second order harmonics. So this is going to add some more top end and just kind of fatten up the sound. Next is what it's going through is this Arts Acoustic reverb. Now I don't always put reverb on my bass lines, and this is actually a pretty big reverb tail. I just thought it was giving it a little bit of space. And notice how the big thing here, it's very subtle. It's only, the wet signal is coming in at minus 23 dB. But the important thing to note is that I've cut off all the low end so that this isn't going to be interfering with the actual low mid of the bass line. It's more to kind of give it some presence in the mid range and help it sit better in the mix. And this is actually probably the same reverb that I'm using on my lead channel so that it feels like all these sounds are in the same room. So next up is this Replica XT, which is the delay that I'm using. Now this is just a simple dotted eighth note delay. I'm not even sure if this is this is a ping pong kind of delay. So this is just helping to give it some of that stereo imaging feel, kind of panning it across a stereo field while it's bouncing left and right on a dotted eighth note grid. So really, really important. You don't have to use a dotted eighth note. I a lot of times do, but sometimes with bass lines, you'll see a quarter note or an eighth note without any of the dots will be fine as well. And then, of course, last but not least, we have this LFO tool, which is there to do side chaining. And this just helps when the kick is in by ducking the first 2 16th notes, and then the last 2 16th notes kind of come in. Now, granted, this probably isn't the best practice. I probably should be doing something more like this, but it doesn't. I mean, track's done, so we'll see. So what may be more helpful is hearing this with the kick. So basically what this is doing, to me, it makes it accentuate the kick coming in and makes almost the kick sound louder because the bass lines aren't quite as loud right when that first kick hits. So that's kind of what that's doing. And then the last but not least, what I have here is this utility. Now I'm automating the volume throughout the track, but I also have increased the width a little bit to add a little bit of stereo information to all the bass lines. And of course, I also have this Fab Filter Volcano, which I'm automating. This isn't doing anything here. It's just at the start of the track, I'm automating the filter cutoffs and resonance. So that's just for filter automation. This isn't really doing anything special, especially to the sound itself when they're all together. Yeah, but take a listen to this utility that's adding the width. So pushing out to the side and then making sure everything below 120 hertz is in mono. Now that's not going to be that much because I pretty much scooped out everything below maybe 80 to 100 hertz anyway, but this just makes sure that the actual stereo, the stereo field below 120 or 150 hertz is all in mono. And sometimes what I'll even do, and maybe this is on the master, you'll see I'll scoop out again at 85 hertz, just cut, this is a sideband, so it's just basically cutting out all the side information below 85 hertz, just to make sure that none of that stereo information could be causing any phase cancellations when you're in these really low frequencies or large wavelengths. So take a listen to this at the drop, maybe. And then, of course, this sub bass also has, this isn't just a sine wave, it actually has some harmonics here. And what that's doing is just filling out the low mid a little bit, but for some reason, this is kind of always how I've done it, is having frequencies up and then just cutting it using a filter at about 400 to 800 hertz. Yeah. So anyway, I hope you guys have found this useful. And if you have any questions, feel free to let me know. If you want more information about getting a sub bass like this and how you should do it with the kick and all this stuff, Reorder has a really good tutorial on that. And Adam Ellis also has talked a lot about this sub bass management. So this is kind of, these are all some other good producers that are really well known in the industry that can really help a lot too. So don't be afraid to ask them or talk to them about it, because they're both really excellent teachers. And once again, yeah, just look around and keep learning. And once again, if you have any other questions, feel free to let me know. Hopefully this has been helpful, and I will see you guys in the next video.